I'm joined in the studio by Husam Zomlot. He's the Palestinian ambassador to the UK, listening to every word of what Ambassador Haakábi had to say. What's your immediate response?
I have no response, to tell you the truth, because I would respond if I had what was the US vision, the US policy. What I had was what was the Israeli policy and narrative and preferences and terminology, Judea and Samaria. So forgive me, Bيرس. Pass on.
When you hear the analogy, as you put it, of America and Israel having a form of a marriage where Israel is the wife, albeit an unpopular wife, what did you make of that?
Well, I don't want to comment on that, but in general, if he means by a wife a partner, even if your partner misbehaves, it is your responsibility, especially if you are the more senior partner in this relationship. Israel would not be able to do anything without the US direct agreement, instructions. If your partner is misbehaving, it doesn't mean you have to kick everybody else. You kick your other partners, your other friends. You let your partner wreak havoc in the neighborhood. No, you tell your partner, cool down, calm down. So this idea that your partner is absolutely immune, untouchable, above the law, comes before Britain and France, comes before Qatar and Saudi Arabia, comes before Palestine and Jordan and Egypt, comes before the UN and international global order, is exactly what got us to this situation.
I did feel that the attack in Doha was indefensible, even if you're the United States, because how could they defend an attack on an ally? Somewhere that I was in Qatar for the state dinner for President Trump a few months ago. And I saw the warmth of the relationship between him and the Emir of Qatar. And I would imagine the Emir has been reported is furious, understandably, as are many other leaders in the region. And yet neither President Trump nor Ambassador Haakábi will come out and condemn it outright, which I'm disappointed in.
You should be, and everybody else should be, because the US is literally undermining its own standing, its own allies, only because of that unruly partner. It's unbelievable how much this is literally diminishing the role of the US that is and has been expected to be a leading force in a world that is governed by rules. That's why the US hosts the UN in New York. It's very regrettable, and I assure you that bombing of Qatar was not just about Israel wanting to bomb Qatar or kill the Hamas leaders that were there at the invitation of the US and Qatar and Egypt to deliberate the final touches of a ceasefire. It is unheard of that you actually bomb the negotiators. Put that aside. Put it aside. But why did Netanyahu and Israel choose to bomb them? Because they did not want a ceasefire. This whole argument.
Well, that was my take on it.
Of course it is.
It's like,
of course it is.
Obviously, you cannot say you want a ceasefire and then try and murder all the people who are gathering to go over the plan for the ceasefire.
Of course it is. Why did Israel bomb Iran right in the middle of June, on the 12th of June, if I remember, for that 12 days of exchange? There was the UN conference that you saw only yesterday and the day before. It was supposed to be in June, where the world comes and resolve this issue. They go and bomb, so they derail, divert, and they did it again in Qatar. The policy, the strategy is no ceasefire. They are not interested in the hostages. I assure you, hostages would have been out long ago had we gone in the direction of the first ceasefire, let alone all the other proposals on the table. So why is Netanyahu doing this? And we need to understand the situation so we can actually find a solution. Netanyahu and Israel cannot stop this war. They will not stop this war unless forced. And that's why, right this moment, in the middle of a genocide, what we are busy with, Bيرس, is actually peace. We are so busy trying to go in a different direction than Netanyahu and Israel.
But why, look, the obvious thing that everybody comes back to on the pro-Israeli side and from the American administration is release the hostages. And to me, until or if Hamas come under enough pressure, probably from the Arab world to do this, to release those hostages. It will always give cover to Israel to say, this is why we can't stop. If the hostages got released and Israel continued to devastate Gaza, I think the world would turn even more against them very, very quickly. But a lot of people I speak to are conflicted because they say it's awful what's happening in Gaza. It's terrible how many civilians are being killed. But what about the hostages?
Do you think...
Why is there not more pressure internally
do you think
on Hamas to release these hostages?
Do you think since the 8th of October until today, almost 2 years, you think Israeli actions correspond to them wanting the hostages? Really? Seriously?
Well,
or even for that matter...
But that's not my point.
Or even for that matter, targeting Hamas?
No, but that wasn't the point. That wasn't the point I made. I actually believe, for what it's worth, and I said this to the ambassador, I actually believe that you should look at what people like Smotrich and Ben-Gvir have been saying and understand they have always had a bigger plan, which clearly now involves expelling Palestinians from their homes in the millions. And I view that as ethnic cleansing. So I've been clear about that. And I think people that warned that was the real plan from some of these ministers all along have been proven, I'm afraid, right. However, the point I was making to you, you haven't quite directly answered, because it's important, I think, that if Hamas released the hostages and Israel did not then have a ceasefire and did not show they wanted peace, I think the opprobrium against them from the world would be utterly overwhelming. But as long as those hostages remain in those tunnels being tortured and being mistreated in the most cruel and barbaric way, it gives Israel the cover that they may well want for other things, but it gives them the cover. Why is there not more pressure internally from the Arab world to get Hamas to release the hostages?
Actually, what we know from the Qataris, the Egyptians, and our partners in the region, that very moment when the Hamas leaders were in Qatar, there was a significant amount of pressure on them to actually sign the American presented proposal. Boom! Netanyahu decided to completely and abruptly destroy that. And in any situations like this...
Which I think was ridiculous and stupid. I mean, for the reason you've just articulated.
Because the last 2 years have been absolutely bluntly clear. And you and I have had many conversations about this. And, you know, for many years, we were talking, but not heard. Not heard. And for many years and decades, we've been talking and not seen. So finally, we are being heard and seen. And I want you to know that from the very beginning, everything the Palestinian people and the Palestinian leadership have been doing is trying to sort this out in a statesman-like, with a vision. And I'm talking about from day one. Once the Nakba happened and our ethnic cleansing happened in 1948, you're talking about ethnic cleansing now. This is a pattern. The first political vision of the Palestinian people and the leadership at the time was one democratic state for all of the people, be it Palestinians, Christians and Muslims, be it Israeli Jews, one democratic state. And as we moved on, the argument from Israel and its allies, including the US, because the Palestinians might be more in number, because of the demographic threat, you see the racist side of that, Israel will never, ever accept a one democratic state. They will never accept Palestinians to be part of that state because they will vote and will have the right to vote. And therefore, one day, a Palestinian by the name of Khalil will be the president. Okay. Down the line, we had to find a formula to actually achieve that end of the conflict and peace. And then the formula was the two-state solution. Many people think that the two-state solution is a Palestinian demand. Wrong. The two-state solution was a Palestinian painful concession. Why? Because do you know that the 1967 borders that the ambassador was talking about now is 22% of the historic Palestine? And do you know that it's less than half of what the United Nations gave to the Palestinian state in 1947, the partition plan, Resolution 181, yet still in 1988, the Palestinian leadership, Yasser Arafat, the late Yasser Arafat, the founder of our movement and the father of the nation, announced the establishment of a Palestinian state, declared on the 22%. Since then, we signed Oslo, and we have been so insisting on implementing that very painful compromise in every sense. And I've just heard the ambassador, the US ambassador, saying that Oslo stipulates that there will not be a Palestinian state. Really? An international law does not stipulate a Palestinian state. Seriously, this needs reality check. Oslo was an interim period for 5 years that must lead and yield a state of Palestine. That was the agreement. And we entered into these interim arrangements. In these 5 years, Israeli settlements in the West Bank, the occupied West Bank, quadrupled. Today, in the middle of genocide, the most painful experience any nation can go through, genocide. What we are thinking about and acting towards is peace and is putting an end to all this. And what you saw in London 2 days ago, the announcement about the recognition of the state of Palestine, is part of our vision towards the future.
Okay, so but on that point, so it's a very significant week. Clearly, it's historic. But if Israel and the United States simply totally ignore it, particularly the United States, how meaningful is it? I mean, he was saying, the ambassador, it doesn't mean anything because they don't recognize it. You know, where does it get you? Where does it get the Palestinian people? Yes, okay, the UK has said we recognize the state of Palestine, but if the United States doesn't and Israel doesn't, how meaningful is it?
Well, I've heard President Trump many times saying that he really wants to be the man who make peace in the Middle East. He really wants to be the man to be remembered as the one who actually brought an end.
Which I'm sure is true.
Okay. So let's work on that, number one. Number two, that only Israel, and with it America, but the rest of the world is with you and I, Piers, is not a small measure. And remember the anti-apartheid movement. Remember the apartheid regime of South Africa. Actually, the last two countries that supported that regime was Israel and the US. And remember that once you have the rest of the world, including the UK, because the UK plays a significant role. You mentioned in your introduction that the UK, Britain, ruled Palestine in the time of the mandate, 1919 until 1948, and unfortunately have issued that Balfour Declaration that has cancelled us as a nation. And since then have been part of not preparing us for statehood, but of the Nakba of 1948. To come to a moment, and me personally as an ambassador, to be part of and witness this moment that the UK recognize the Palestinian people's right to self-determination and sovereignty over their land is not a small measure, and it is in the right direction. Because number one, it's about Britain more than it is about Palestine. It corrects history. It begins to correct history. It is a moment of leadership for Britain to say that, yes, we acknowledge the mistakes of the past and we shall right the wrongs. That's good for peace. And then from there, we move. This is merely the beginning. This is a foundational step on which we will build the peace up against the Smotrich and the Netanyahus and the Ben Gvirs. And I've been following some of your remarks of late, focusing on Smotrich and Ben Gvir. Please, Piers, this has been a successive Israeli governments who embrace the settlement enterprise. Let's not be reductionist and just reduce it to two individuals.
No, fair enough.
To do individuals.
Fair enough.
We need to bring that project to an end. The colonial expansionist project that believes they have a green card to bomb every single country around them. This has to end. How do you end it? You end it, number one, by ending the genocide. And I'll tell you, the pressure, the energy we have through our friends worldwide, including the UK, is going to show very soon. You will hear in...
But you have to also... but to get to peace, realistically, to get to any kind of lasting peace, you're going to have to get a situation where the Israelis believe they're secure, that their people are secure, that they're not going to get bombed by the Houthis, by Hamas, by Hezbollah, funded by Iran in many cases, that they're not going to live their own lives in perpetual fear of rockets coming over. It is a two-way street. Again, I've used this analogy before. It's not exactly the same situation, but there are many parallels. Northern Ireland, they had to get to a situation where both sides compromised, and they did eventually get there. But there's got to be a compromise on your side that the Israeli people can have their security. You accept that?
Of course, everybody must have security. But the question is security only something for the Israelis? Because I always hear security.
No, it should be both ways, yeah.
I always hear Israelis require security. Well, in fact, it's our security that has been infringed upon over the decades. It's us who lost 2/3 of our nation in the Nakba, all the way to a genocide now in Gaza and the settler terrorism in the West Bank that you spoke about many times.
Important to remember,
our security. Look at the numbers.
Important to recognise.
If I learn,
important to recognise and acknowledge that at the time that hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were being displaced in 1948, hundreds of thousands of Jews were also being displaced.
Not by Palestinians.
No, I didn't say by Palestinians. I said in neighbouring Arab countries that was going on too. So, again, to take a more rounded picture, that from their side caused them a lot of hurt too. You accept that?
Yeah. But we'll need to read a bit more about that historic moment and what happened there and the role of Israel and some groups. Let's not go in that.
But I'm trying to explain why they feel the way they do about the history.
Let's focus on now. And then we can drill backward, because our energy must be directed at stopping this madness, this carnage, the mass murder of people and the mass destruction. I'm from Gaza, as you know. I mean, what Israel is doing in Gaza in the last few days is not even, I cannot begin to describe it in comparison to already the genocide that the world has been watching over the last 2 years. What they're doing is just beyond human comprehension and description. However, I want to go back to the issue of security. Number one, I told you we deserve security. And if I learn anything as a Palestinian myself of the last 2 years, that's one thing. We must work hard to ensure the security of the Palestinian people. If I fight for a state, it is for that reason, to make sure that we provide security. Never again we should allow our children to be slaughtered in front of the world like this. Never again that entire families wiped out, men executed in front of their families, entire neighborhoods wiped out every day in and day out, hospitals, schools, what have you. We have to provide security for our people. And the one thing that we have responsibility towards is that this will never happen. How do we do that? It's either by building strong military to defend our people, or build a state that has an arm in the international system that can use international judicial institutions like the ICJ and the ICC to provide deterrence, legal deterrence, and protect our people. And this is what we're doing. We're not really racing in the military side and buying more weapons or building bigger armies. We are racing to be part of the international system. That's number one. Number two, about security. Do you, and I'm really, this is a conversation, do you, Piers, really believe that security is an outcome of more armies, more guns, or security is an outcome of peace? Security is an outcome of fulfilling rights. I've heard the US ambassador just now talking about our finances. By the way, this is our money. Israel is stealing, literally. It's the biggest act of financial robbery in modern history. It's our money, and they're holding it. This isn't about money. This is about rights. So I'm telling you this to say, also the Israeli public and the Israeli leadership must believe that security can only come, not via bombing your way into it, but by fulfilling people's rights. And no matter what you do, no matter how you want to do it, security will be the product of a real lasting peace. In the meantime, of course, once people's rights are fulfilled, the state of Palestine will absolutely make sure that it protects its citizens and protects its neighbors and adheres to its commitment in the international arena. 100%. And I assure you, if you will have an exemplary state in that region, it will be the state of Palestine.
You know what? That would be a great thing for Palestinians and for the world. Thank you, Ambassador. It's always good to have you in the studio, and I appreciate it.